go ahead and find my notes here and get started and call the meeting to order. This being the meeting of the Sandag Audit Committee, Friday, June 25th, 2021 at 12:30 p.m. I believe we have an announcement from our interpreter, Nancy Hand, to introduce herself and walk through our interpretive services.
Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Hand. I will be the Spanish English interpreter for this meeting, and I will introduce myself in Spanish and then give the instructions in English and then Spanish. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Nancy Hand. Yo soy la intérprete de español-inglés para esta reunión. Voy a presentar las instrucciones para utilizar la función de interpretación en inglés primero y después en español. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll down to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon that looks like a globe and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor pase a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, que es un globo terráqueo, y seleccione Español, Spanish. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, por un celular, tableta, etcétera, presione los puntos suspensivos o 3 puntitos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, puede seleccionar Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Greatly appreciated. With that, we will go ahead and move into the pledge. And Stuart, if you would be willing to lead us, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Awesome. Thank you. And we already know that we have a quorum. So we're on to the agenda at this point of approval of the meeting minutes. Did any I don't see any member of the public that have comments on the minutes. Does any board member want to make comments on the minutes? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, was that Stuart the second?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. So we have a motion and a second. Francesca, can you call for the vote, please?
Thank you very much. And I was a little hasty earlier. Agnes is not with us, so I just wanted to note that for the record, but we do still have a quorum.
Okay.
For the board member Chair Zito.
Vote yes.
Thank you. Board member Vice Chair Vasquez.
Vice Chair Vasquez, yes.
Thank you very much. Public member Agnes Wong Nickerson is absent. Public member Halpern.
Halpern, yes.
Thank you. And public member Monson?
Monson, yes.
Thank you very much. And that does pass with those members present.
Thank you.
I wanted to, Francesca, just to inform you that Agnes just emailed me. She is actually on a number. She called, but she is muted, she said.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and, oh, I see her now. We've changed her name.
She's coming in.
Agnes, would you like to go ahead and provide your vote for the minutes?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great.
And I'll include your vote in the minutes. And then that item does pass unanimously.
Great. Thank you. With that, we move on to public comments. Francesca, do you see any public comments?
No, Chair, no hands from the public.
Okay, great. Thanks. With that, we'll move on to board member comments. I'll briefly start just saying that I did watch the meeting. I wasn't able to attend in person where our recommendations were presented. I think most of us probably know at this point in time that that our recommendations around some of the structural changes were not accepted. Stuart was there to talk about some of the compensation, the vice chair being on the board. made some comments as well that were all salient, but and I beforehand had a conversation with the chair of the board, Catherine, and just, emphasize some of the points that we had gone over before, in particular the benefits of having at least alternating terms on this committee, so we make sure we don't have rollovers all at the same time. But she had expressed her opinions and the board's vice chair opinions as to why they were going the way they were, and I think most of us know the outcome at this point. Others may want to make some comments. I just want to make sure that we understand that this particular topic isn't a discussion item today. It's not on the agenda, so we can make comments, but if we want to discuss it, maybe we'll bring it back. If people want to discuss it actually in more in depth, make that comment, and we can try to bring it back for an agenda item in the future to see if there are other things that we would like to pursue. With that, do any other board members want to make some comments? Or board member comments? I see no hands. And I do want to thank Stuart for showing up. I appreciate it, and making yourself available for that meeting. The next item on the agenda is the executive director's report. I don't know, is Hassan here yet, or is he still at the borders meeting?
I think he's still at the borders meeting. I know he's going to give a update, but he was going to do the borders and then join us after.
Okay. Well, then the next one is you, Marion. I'll let Hassan speak when he's able to make our meeting.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I'll be brief on my update because I have a lot on the agenda items today that we'll specifically talk about. I did want to share that I have possibly been successful. We made an offer and he tentatively accepted the offer for a replacement for Michelle. And we also have a new intern that started yesterday. Her name is Brianna. And so she'll come to us and hopefully learn a great deal. She's a full-time senior, I believe. Her major is econ, which tends to be a nice compliment for an auditor. And she served in our military in the Navy. So we thank her for her service and look forward to having her join us. Other than that, I'll basically have a lot to share in the upcoming items, so nothing more.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. You have a busy day today.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if he will, but Francesca, if you could just let me know if and when Hassan shows up, and we'll try to figure out how to fit him in. With that, we'll move on to item number 5, which is the proposed audit plan. And Mary, oh wait, Stuart is waving at me.
Yeah, I've got, I think this is the appropriate place, but direct me if not. In relation to your report, Mary, those of us who followed the OIPA since the beginning know that there have been some growing pains with the startup of the office, and in particular with the agency and the board developing understanding of the somewhat unique need for independence of you and your office. In fact, listening to today's board meeting, it seemed like there was an issue of someone replacing the materials that you intended to present to the board this morning. So my question is this: since our last meeting, have you experienced any instances of what you might characterize as interference with your independence? Or even simply, have you experienced any more benign issues that are getting in the way of getting your job done?
So today's, hopefully we're going to work this out. I did send an email to Hassan and Melissa and the production team who handles the agenda items. And there's been a few lately, specifically for this item or for this agenda, as well as for the one this morning, which is what you heard, Stuart, where it's just, I'm posting stuff and I'm preparing documents and then they get uploaded to the agenda folder, but somewhere along the line, they either get deleted, replaced, or, changed. And I think it's probably a growing pain kind of thing where we have to just maybe educate the team from management's perspective, the difference between OPA and the independence that really needs to be there around our documents. And for the most part, like John's really good about it. making sure that that independence is there and not changing any wording. And if he does, he always reaches out to me and makes recommendations. But I just think it's the general staff sometimes where items have been loaded up there by Lloyd or myself, and they, like today, it was a completely different document. I had prepared an item that went to the board to discuss my part of the corrective action plan. And that document was completely removed, and another document that was basically the audit committee document that I had prepared previously for the audit committees with a stamp, kind of a smacked on stamp that said, now it's for today's meeting. Well, it still had the relevant information, luckily. My concern was it made me as the IPA in my office just kind of look sloppy and unprofessional. And that was a little frustrating for me. Another incident that was for this meeting was an item 7 got completely removed from the agenda. And had I not went and looked at the agenda right after, it wouldn't have made the agenda. And it's just stuff like that. I think we just need to hammer out more and make sure that there's a clear understanding that, you know, when an item gets put on there, it should not be changed or removed unless I've had a final look at it. So I just think more discussion needs to happen. And I did talk with Hassan, sent him a message, and with Melissa, and Melissa agreed that, yeah, we can have, you know, some more discussions to make sure that in the future, this stuff, you know, kind of gets minimalized. I know accidents and mistakes happen. We're all human, but it just seems to be happening a lot. And so I would hope that in the future, we can iron this out. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if I could just follow on, I'm just wondering if somebody else could speak to that. Because I know last year, you know, there was quite an issue about the redaction of your audit report. And after a lot of discussion, I think the board came down pretty firmly that there should not be any redaction of audit reports. And to me, there's sort of a similar train here, which is that, you know, the information that you're providing, whether this committee or to the board, should really be pretty unfettered. And so it's a curiosity that you're having, as you're describing, more than one instance of things you're trying to communicate are somehow getting changed or you know, in the wrong folder. I'm not sure exactly what, but can somebody else speak to why we're having so much trouble with this, in particular with the IPA?
I don't know.
I will.
Sorry, I don't know that we have the right people in the meeting. John, if you want to say something. That's
Yeah, I
fine.
can just, I'm happy to address this. Since Mary identified this issue this morning, I have reached out to the clerk of the board and the admin staff to try to find out the background of what happened. What I understand, it's still very early, but it looks like what we really have in this situation is that it was an administrative issue of something initially being put into the wrong folder, and then in the course of trying to correct that to put it in the right folder, that the wrong document might have been corrected. And from my point of view, probably what we have is staff is trying to find the right balance between being completely hands-off in all of the Office of Independent Performance Auditors documents that are uploaded, while at the same time making sure that Mary's items, that they're in the right format and they get to the right place. And I think that we hopefully we'll find that balance to where we can help her to communicate what she wants, not touch any substance, any content, but just help to facilitate the process of getting her documents into the right place at the right time.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Stuart, and thanks for that, John. I guess, Mary, it sounds like something else happened this morning, which I don't think, I mean, I may be behind on email I've been appraised of, but if you could keep me in the loop too, that would be helpful with respect to how this is going, and maybe you and I can chat about what's going on a little bit more and bring back to this group what we expect to change because of it. But I don't, obviously we can't take action here, but it would be useful to understand what will change to make sure that these issues are minimized, hopefully without creating new ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things I suggested today, because, one good thing about auditors is that we keep everything, right? We document and keep everything. So, before I reached out, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't on our side, something we had faulty done. And sure enough, Lloyd had done it. I had followed through. John had reviewed it. I had given my final approval. The document got put in the folder that it was supposed to be put into, and then it was the wrong document. So something happened, but what I recommended and requested moving forward is that before any item that has OPA in it or any audit committee agenda, that it goes to me right before posting so I can review it to make sure the right documents and the complete set of documents are included, and this will then prevent anything from getting out of the door that shouldn't have.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 5. So you can start with that, Mary. Oh, wait, I'll check. Is Hassan present yet? I don't see him. I don't think. No, I
He's
don't.
not been able to join us yet.
Okay. So go ahead and start on item number 5 then. Thanks.
Okay, so as everyone is familiar with, this will be the third one coming up now. The auditor's office is to perform or prepare an annual audit plan. This would be for the fiscal year 2022, 21-22 audit plan fiscal year. The purpose of the plan is really to take our resources that we've identified as available to us and identify the amount of direct resources we have, and then based on a risk analysis that is performed by myself, discussions with management, risk discussions that I had with the board of directors, as well as the audit committee, and other audit related or inherent type risks that have been identified. I then take those resources and scatter them about to determine what is the best way to use them that would bring the most impact and efficiency and effectiveness to the organization overall. And we had discussed in the last few meetings the approach that I was going to move forward with, and really looking at the foundation and then kind of building from there. So taking all that into consideration and looking at, where can we be, the best bang for our buck? Where can we give the most help towards and make it a more efficient and effective with good controls? I've come to the conclusion, and you've got those items identified. You'll note that in this audit plan, we have where I've recognized that there are other, of course, projects that I've identified as risky, which is typical that we obviously don't have sufficient resources to complete them all. So typically what happens with that is it just is a rolling or an ongoing process. Bob, you're probably familiar with this as an auditor. We just kind of roll it into the next year, and we keep doing it and then adding any additional risk and reviews that we find, and then kind of reprioritize if we need to and allocate the hours. And that's what we've done here. The plan is tied, of course, to not just Sandag's goals and takes into account Sandag's goals, but then also the goal for OPA. And with that comes about various goals that tied into the strategic goals of Sandag, and then tasks or activities within those goals, and how I intend as the IPA to ensure that we accomplish the plan and that we're successful in accomplishing the plan, as well as the performance measures that the audit committee set up for me. And I've identified how that kind of ties also into the plan and how we're going to accomplish and make sure that I'm able to meet those standards and those expectations around the performance goals. So with that, if you were to look on page starting 17 of 45 of the agenda, you'll see really where the plan is and where it dedicates specific a number of direct hours and the types of reviews we're going to be doing. We talked about the SR 125, and we committed to giving 200 of those hours to finish that review up, and we'll get that done. That will be kind of what we're doing out the door. And then we're still starting and going into where I talked to you about pulling apart the contracts and procurement audit and really looking at operational processes and system controls around vendors is the first one we're going to start with, and then move down from there. So based on that plan, as you can see, ultimately, if I was to take all the assessment of risk and identify all the areas of risk, we would need about 6,000 hours of direct audit hours for this year to do all of our planned audits or priority audits. However, the only available amount is 2,452, with good news that we'll be able to add about 1,200 more to that when we onboard this new auditor. So some additional audits will be able to be performed, which is good. But then again, as I said, the ones that are kind of grayed out and we don't have resources, that will just move into the new fiscal year. So with that, I am open for any questions.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks for the thorough report. The staff report was very well done, appreciated. Do we have any public comments on this item, Francesca?
No, Chair, no hands from the public.
Okay. Let's see, I see one from, sorry, I'll see one from Agnes anyway. I'll get to the others in the future. So Agnes, if you had a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. I want to ask, given the, the very large capital expenditure, budget that SENDEC oversees, do we have specific like construction audit actually, in addition to what your office does, Mary?
No, we don't actually. That's sort of like a wish list I have. You're right. We are an agency with a huge capital expenditure budget. Now they do get somewhat looked at with some quality assurance reviews that I believe are required to be done under some federal grant projects, as well as the external auditors from an oversight perspective, like if Caltrans or the feds are looking at it. And then also a little bit would be looked at from the perspective of our external auditors and testing around federal grants. So they do get looked at somewhat, but yes, that is an area that we hope to in the future take and look at certain projects. Now that will get touched on some, Agnes, as we're looking at operational process and system controls around contracts and procurement and around different budgeting. So those will be touched when we do sampling around contracts within those specific types of reviews that we're doing, and we'll follow through and make sure that there's appropriateness there. But taking an actual capital improvement project on its own and a construction project and doing a full-blown audit on that, we just simply don't have the resources to do that.
Yeah, and I thank you for the information. And I would encourage, I think it's really hard because it's actually a pretty specialized kind of audit. And I've seen, other places that either I have worked for or volunteer for. It's not uncommon for them to actually contract out construction audit because, as I said, it's pretty specialized, especially when it's a large amount involved. So I would just encourage that, I know you already said that it's on your wish list, so maybe we'll see how we can help,
So just a little bit of background on, sure, a little bit of background on that, Agnes, is I've actually done construction. I've done some pretty big size construction audits, both at the state level and at the county level for Yolo County on capital improvement projects. So I'm very comfortable with doing those types of audits, as well as I believe I have a couple of people on staff that are also very competent in doing those audits. We did ask for in the prior year, a $100,000 external contract to do an IT penetration type audit, which we felt, isn't an area that we have the expertise we would like to have, and that we felt was a risk and it was needed. And that it also could, at the same time, doing the penetration review for the IT, it could also give our auditors some training, though we have been trained in IT, not specifically that type of IT. So we would have hoped for that. And that funding was not awarded to us. So, yeah.
Was that it, Agnes? Are you still there?
Okay,
Okay.
so it's the staffing and funding issue.
Okay,
Yeah.
Agnes, I think
Yeah,
we may
that's it.
have.
Thank you. Yes,
Sorry,
can you hear me?
Are others hearing her okay? Is it me just breaking up or is she
Yeah.
breaking?
I'm breaking
Yeah,
up.
she broke up a little bit. I got most of what you said, Agnes, but yeah, it's a funding and resource issue. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just to let you know, Agnes, your connection might be a little flaky because you're breaking up some. Bob, you had some questions?
Just one clarification, Mary.
Mhm.
If I understood in your presentation, about 1,200 hours, you're going to be able to apply with the new person
Yes.
that has just come on board. Is that correct?
He should be, I hope to have him on board August 3rd. Yeah.
Okay. Just a comment, Mary, I really like the audit plan. I like the way that you put it together, how you tie it in, your goals, goals of the agency. I also understand that having done a lot of those audit plans myself, is that you're never going to be able to cover 100% of all the risks. That's just not realistic. You have to stay within your staff ability and
Right.
the hours. So I get all of that. I do hope though that, and I get the rolling over. There may even be some reprioritization over the year with this audit plan. That happens as well. But again, I just wanted to say I like the plan. I think you're covering the bases that need to be covered with the staff that you have. So I'd be more than happy, Chair, to put forth a motion when it's ready.
Thank you, Bob.
Why don't you, Bob, why don't you just go ahead and make the motion?
Okay. I motion that the audit plan proposed by Mary be approved. And I'm assuming and this plan will then go to the board, correct? For
Yes,
presentation.
as information. Mhm.
Okay, then and have it approved by the committee and then relayed as information to the board.
Thank you, Bob.
If I could just clarify one point, all of your approvals do go to the board actually for ratification, not just for information, but it would not be a separate item.
Perfect, thank you. And for discussion, I'll go ahead and second the motion. Stuart.
Thanks. Thanks, Mary. Very comprehensive plan. I'd actually like to add two things. One, I'd like to start with something that I actually don't see in the plan. And when you first saw the meeting materials that were posted for the June 11th board meeting, and particularly the materials for item 15, were you concerned with the significant errors and material omissions in the materials?
I was, and I shared my concerns with the chair, with the subcommittee, and I also shared it with Chair Zito. I provided sort of a response where I felt that there was some weaknesses in the interpretation and that there was some lacking support around the analysis and my perspective from an audit perspective. I shared that information. And I think it obviously there must have been something heard from that analysis, because they did change their mind around the percentage that they allocated towards my my raise. So there was obviously some consideration taken on my response around the errors where I felt, or the inaccuracies or lack of analysis that was performed. So I think that they did take some of that into consideration, obviously, because it did change. So yeah, I think it's very important. I think one of the things that board members all in discussion, and I had this discussion with Chair Zito as well, pointed out to me that all of them across the board felt that, you know, having useful information that had support and analysis kind of there available, how they reached their conclusions would be helpful overall as a board in making any informed decision. So I think it's important that the information is organized well, and that how they concluded based on that information, how that conclusion occurred, is important for the board to have available to them.
Yeah, and so then we're also concerned when at the meeting itself, in the spoken presentation, the board chair wittingly or unwittingly presented the board with inaccurate information relating to the audit committee public member terms of comparable agencies. And then the board relied on that inaccurate information in making their decision. The reason I'm bringing this up is because if the board is making decisions based on inaccurate or incomplete information, doesn't that itself create a risk to Sandag and the taxpayers?
Yeah, I mean, if in fact that's what's happening, and you know, because we weren't there, so I don't know if she was provided information and told that there was a analysis done, and as a point of that analysis, here's the results. If she was told that, then, you know, and she relied on that without asking for the conclusion to those analyses, then, you know, whose fault is that? You know, I don't know.
Well, I defer to others, but it seems to me that that part of the rationale for the Brown Act is so that the public can be fully informed on the basis upon which.
So jumping in, one, I do want to make sure that we're having a conversation around what should go into the audit plan, right?
No, this speaks to risk, and so let me.
No, I understand, but what should go into the audit plan? The second part of that, I would just stipulate, I want to make sure we're clear about information provided to the board, which the information that's provided to the board is the information that's in the staff reports, and comments that are made at the board meeting, including those by the chair. Board members, including the chair, will make all the comments they want. And having been on the board for 5 years, I can tell you, a lot of them are inaccurate. And part of your job as a board member is to determine when comments are being made by a board member, whether or not they're accurate or not, and how much you want to take stock in it. But you have to rely on primarily the information presented in the staff report and in the discussions that are made at the board meetings are helping to inform you, but they shouldn't necessarily be taken as factual unless it's being asked directly of a staff member.
Okay, so to that point, Mary, given the risk that we've just described, do you think that your audit plan somehow needs to take into account the risk relating to the accuracy and completeness of information that's being provided to the board when they're making decisions? Is that, I know that under former Chair Voss, there was an implementation of a pretty elaborate plan of excellence that I think the quality of information we see from Ray and Andre and others is really robust. But do you think there might be additional QC work that's needed?
You know, so that's difficult to audit. It's difficult to audit that because, you know, I can audit around quality assurance, right? So I can look at information and say, is it useful the way it's being provided? Is there an analysis done? But it would be difficult for me to audit and say something is correct or not correct as far as the information being provided, or if it's sufficient or insufficient. So really, you know, I talked about this before, even with Chair Zito, about the culture, right? It's hard to audit the culture of an organization. We can look at the quality assurance process and we can say, you know, what is the process that information is being shared? How is it gathered? How is it then organized? Is it summarized? And does the summary include analysis that shows how the end result was driven? So, you know, what is the end result based on? And is all the information there that helps the board make an informed decision? So that I could do that type of audit, but it would be impossible for me to say, you know, is every bit of information coming out of Sandag 100% accurate? We just have to rely that it is.
Got it. Okay. Just one last question, if I could. Sorry, Hassan.
Yeah, Chair Zito, and I'm not gonna speak to the part what Mary's. She can audit whatever she wants or not audit whatever she wants. But Mr. Stewart, I just want to tell you that it is my job and my responsibility to make sure that every report that goes to the board is as accurate as humanly possible, you know, regardless of what it is. So I can attest that I am totally responsible, fully responsible for any inaccuracy that goes to the board. And I have confidence in the staff that I've been with for the last 2.5 years that they won't give the board anything that's not accurate intentionally. I mean, mistakes gets made, of course, and I don't have enough time in the world to read every report, but I can attest to you that if the board asks for something, we give them the best information we have based on the best data we have, and never ever try to mislead regardless of the issue. And I'm not talking specifically, I mean, Mary could go into whatever area she wants to, but I can attest to, and I will definitely stand by the staff when they're asked to report on an issue, they report based on the best information available. Does that make everything we give them 100%? Of course not. That's not humanly possible.
Well, I appreciate that. In this instance, it was actually a report from board members to other board members. So I'm not.
That I cannot speak to because I speak to the report that come from the staff. And I will tell you this. I think Chair Zito said it. I've been with this board for 2.5 years, and I hear a lot of things. And you know, it will take a lot of time to try to verify whether what you hear is accurate or not. But in my report, you're going to hear some of that too. But yeah, I understand. I mean, I'm just talking about the report that goes from staff to the board.
And I just have one other question, if I could, and I appreciate the time, Chair. Regarding goal number 3, Mary, in the plan related to the transparency on the FWA website, I'm a little concerned about the 0% completion. Can you elaborate on that in particular? Who's the management that you referenced in the note that's supposed to be maintaining that? Is that you or is that somebody at Sandag?
Well, the reason why it's, and again, this was, Chair Zito asked some of these questions, but it was the percentages that are at zero because we're just starting the new year. So,
okay, got it.
Yeah. So some of them aren't at 0%, and it's because I had to do some work to get to the plan. And that included interviewing board members and risk assessment and all that. So that's why it's at 80%, and some of the other stuff is at percentages, but most of it's at 0% because we're just starting a new fiscal year. So it's my, well, I do have someone that I reach out to that is staff that updates what I want them to, but it is me who says, can you make sure this is updated? And one of the things is that I will do after I go to the audit committee with any reports moving forward is to actually update the website, to have the new audit plan put on, to have the updated year-end CAP report, the updated fraud, waste, and abuse report. I will also look at the engagement manual, make sure that there's no new laws or regulations that have changed around professional standards, and update that document. So everything, you know, between now and August, we'll be fully updating that website for the new current stuff as well as the stuff in the past, including adding the compensation audit that you had asked about and the other things that are not there yet. So yeah, moving forward, we'll do what the policy states that's on the website, which is everything goes to the audit committee. Once the audit committee does, you know, their blesses it, it will then go, you know, to the board as information or ratification, and then also be posted on the website.
Great, thank you. And again, thank you for the time, Chair.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the great questions. Just to address, since Mary brought it up, one of the questions I had asked, because the interview, I had asked in a one-on-one with her, but because the interviews and the board surveys were supposed to be what was going to inform our audit plan, I was wondering about the 80% completion there. And I do think for anything that's supposed to inform the audit plan, it might be useful in the future to just say, what is our target? Meaning that we don't have confidence that the audit plan has actually got a good basis if we haven't hit that target. And Mary mentioned, for example, like last year, we were lucky to get 50% on that. And so 80% is really good. But I had no basis from which to recognize that. So I just think in the future, it might be useful to say, well, these two items, they're actually informing the audit plan. If we get above 75%, we're good to go. If we get above 50%, we're good to go. So we know whether or not those items have come far enough along. But, it's sort of similar to what the question you had raised, Stuart. So thank you for that. I do not see anybody else on the board. I'll give one more second. With that, we have a motion on the floor to approve staff recommendation in a second. Francesca, can you call for the vote?
Thank you very much. Board Member Chair Zito.
Zito, yes.
Thank you. Board Member Vice Chair Vasquez.
Vice Chair Vasquez, yes.
Thank you. Public Member Agnes Wong Nickerson.
Wong Nickerson, yes.
Thank you. Public Member Stuart Halpern.
Halpern, yes.
Thank you. And Public Member Bob Monson.
Sorry about that. Monson, yes.
Thank you very much. And that does pass unanimously.
Great, thank you. And thank you again, Mary and your staff. This looks like a really good, robust plan for which we can get moving on. With that, since Hassan has joined us, we will go back to item number 3 for the executive director's report, if you're ready for that, Hassan.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair Zito, committee members. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me and being flexible for me to speak. We have 2 policy committee meet at the same time, so I really wanted to speak to you today. First of all, there is some exciting stuff happening in the next couple of weeks. One of them is next Monday, June 28th. I will be joining Lieutenant Governor Eleni Konolakis, Secretary David Kim, and many dignitaries from Mexico and from our US government to sign an MOU regarding Otay Mesa 2. This MOU will confirm our commitment on both sides of the border to deliver this facility on September of 2024, which means we need to start construction sometimes next year. The significance of this is this confirms the commitment between the United States and Mexico. I want to express my thanks and gratitude to our partners from Caltrans. I also want you to know that this project has gained national attention. It was featured in the recent Axios article. It will be featured in the New York Times. This is an example where border regions need to build the infrastructure to get the economic benefit of that. To that end, my team and I and our partner with Caltrans, we're in Washington, D.C. Believe it or not, we actually see people in person without masks. We see the full people, which is nice. We were in the White House meeting with the Deputy National Security Advisor. We met with the Commissioner for Custom Patrol. We also met and had the pleasure of meeting the new Mexican ambassador to the United States, and it's all regarding Otay Mesa 2. The Mexican ambassador committed that he will make this at the top of the agenda for Mexico and the high-level economic dialogue that's taking place, and we're inviting them to do that at the border. Very quick but successful trip. We also had a chance to meet with the Navy regarding the Navwar project. Let me turn to the draft regional transportation plan. As you know, we released the plan May 28th, and it's going to be out for public comment until August 6th. And I need your help. As members of the audit committee, know that it's important, very important, that we be straightforward with the public. This plan is about reimagining the future of transportation system in San Diego. Very soon, later this year, we're going to be opening an amazing project we call the Mid-Coast. Actually, this summer, we're going to turn this amazing plan to MTS to operate. As you know, SANDAG plans builds, and turn it over to the operators. A $2.1 billion project, on time, on budget. I don't know, in my career of 30 years, I've been part of many major infrastructure projects, and I don't know of many that's on time, on budget with this scale. This is very soon, you're gonna see these beautiful red cars operating on an aerial structure, about 3 miles of aerial structure, going to the university, connecting communities from the border. This plan is just a teaser. This is the beginning. If this board approves this plan, and if San Diegans were to fund this plan, you're gonna see several mid-coast open. You're gonna see 10,000 connection points, like Ray Major says, through the transit system. You're gonna see an extensive high occupancy toll lanes with connectors. So San Diego, I believe, with the implementation of this plan, will have the best transportation system in the world. You will be an example of how communities are connected, how people are provided choices, how we are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, how we are sustaining ourselves economically and environmentally. That is what this plan is about. It is not what some go on TV and says, we're gonna spy on people. We're gonna follow people around to know where they go and what their business is. It is not charging people. It is about reimagining and imagining the possibilities for this region. I beg you and I ask you, just tell the truth about the plan, regardless how you feel about it. The truth is, this region needs a future that's sustainable. And I believe the team here at Sandag is delivering that future. And I believe you have an important role to make sure we do it right. And we're good guards of public funds. And Mary and her team is gonna make sure of that. But this plan is not about us spying on people. Please make sure that people at least stick to the truth. That is what this plan is about. So this plan is out until August 6th. We welcome comments, spread the words. We are willing to go anywhere and everywhere to talk truthfully about what this plan is about. And we welcome any constructive comments, and we're willing to make any changes that we needed to make. 2 days ago, we opened the VA station, which is one of the 9 stations on the Mid-Coast. Our chairman, Chair Blakespeare, our vice chair, Gloria, Supervisor Fletcher, many of our board members spoke at the event. And one thing I will repeat that they all said, this VA station signified that we are a proud military town. And to have the veterans access the hospital with a very convenient mode of transportation is important to us. And so I want to thank the leadership for being there. We're gonna open this line again soon. Remember, you hear this a lot, and it came up this morning. Well, what happened to this project? You promised me in Transnet. We are going to the ITAC, the Oversight Committee for Transnet. And yes, some project will not be completed. And yet some project will be re-envisioned. But I reminded the board directors this morning that before you say you broke my promise, remember, if you have money and you're hiding it somewhere, that's one thing. But if you don't have money, that's not something you can just print. We can't print money at Sandag. Maybe the national government can, but not us. And therefore, Transnet cannot deliver what was originally listed as supposedly project. And furthermore, this project might not be the right project anymore. That's what the discussion we're gonna have with the ITAC. We believe some of this project is no longer good or valid for the region. And so we'll look forward to that discussion. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Hassan. Do we have any public member comments on the executive director's report?
No, Chair, no hands from the public.
Great, thanks. give you a
And
minute.
Chair Zito, before I leave, I just want to address one thing that came up this morning about the omission of some board reports. And I want to assure you that I have confidence that my staff will never intentional do that. We're going to work with Mary and say what happened and how we correct this problem. But I just want you to know the trust in my staff to not ever try to omit something without consulting with the independent auditor office is not what we do. So I just want to make sure you knew that.
Yeah, thanks for that. We did chat about that a little bit earlier, and all I ask is for me to understand what the steps will be to try to make the process work a little bit better in the future. And Mary gave me an update during the meeting, and we'll see how that pans out. But thanks.
Okay.
Do any other board members have comments to make on the executive director's report? I see Stuart. You're muted, Stuart.
Hear me now?
Yep.
Great, thank you. As always, Hassan, thank you so much for your time that you take to be with us. As an aside, you brought it up, Colleen and Ray did some great briefings on the RTP this week for the ITAC. We really appreciated that. Today's meeting in discussing the RTP, I believe you used the words that you aspire for San Diego to be an example for the world, and that the plan would demonstrate doing things right. And I think I know the answer to this question, but I think it's helpful to ask it anyway to give you the opportunity. Would you use those same words in describing your aspiration for Sandag's transparency and governance, that we're reasonable to utilize best practices relating to governance and transparency?
And thank you for that question. And I absolutely would use the same word. And Mary and I talk about this. To build a world-class organization, you have to be willing to have everything on the table, be transparent, never hide anything from the public, and be not only transparent, but be very forthcoming about the good and the bad. And I commit to you, and I think Mary knows this, and Mary and I have trust in Mary and her office. I commit to you that that's exactly what we're building here, a world-class organization with the full meaning of this word, whether it's a planning, construction, or the transparency of presenting information to the public. So you have my and my team's commitment to that.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And thanks for your report, Hassan.
You're welcome, sir.
With that, I see no further comments or discussion, so we will go ahead and move on. And just as I was going to say, we'll go ahead and move on to item 6, I believe. I see 7 up on the screen. Item 6, the summary of audits and recommendations. And Mary, I believe you get to take this one too.
Yep. So again, annually, we prepare 2 reports. When we first came to develop this office, one thing that was not available when I got here was a summary of all the audits that had ever been performed on Sandag. And there's a lot of audits that get performed on Sandag and that has been performed on Sandag, and through various aspects, both on construction, quality assurance, fiscal, financial audits, as well as compliance audits and performance audits around federal grant money, which we have a lot of. So there's a lot of audits out there, and there was really no one place for them all to be retained. So one of the rather large ontaking was for my office to develop and to reach out to all Sandag staff to develop a working document that's an ongoing document that identifies all audits that have been performed, along with any corrective action plans or recommendations that came as a result of those audits. And we do it all the way from, we keep a rolling 5 years. So we believe 5 years is sufficient. And so with that, we've generated this report. There was a lot of healthy discussion during the briefings and some extra input. I think it's important to understand the role of my office, and again, understand that we are very limited in our resources. So really for us to have undertaken this report and to create it and brought this information into one document was very time consuming. And we try to keep up on it. One of the responsibilities that we expect or ask for from Sandag management is, and for the most part, they're getting this, and we do have great cooperation, where any audit that is done of any type by anybody, OPA is to be involved in that audit now, and involved in that process, and involved in the outcome of that process, and also the outcome of any corrective action plans, any recommendations that don't get or do get implemented, so that we can update this report that we put together. And so it's a living document that's at any point in time available to the public, to Hassan, to anybody who wants to look and say, okay, here's the overarching issues, here's recommendations for improvement of this organization from all perspectives and all different types of entities that have audited Sandag. And that's what this report is about. The status, you'll note that, you know, we have the yellow, which is meaning recommendations are in progress, or there's an outstanding audit issue. Green means that they've actually corrected it and completed it and accomplished it. And then of course, blue is it's not being implemented. They're just not choosing to. And then red, of course, is it's past the implementation date that we've been provided. So I think it's important to understand is, yes, there's a lot of yellows on here. and really our role is simply to put the status based on what management gives us. And if management doesn't update us once a recommendation has been completed or is not going to, or whatever that outcome is going to be, we don't know what we don't know. And so we can only update it based on the information provided by management. But what you see is a lot of yellow. And I want to help everyone understand that a lot of yellow doesn't necessarily mean that the management's not completing the recommendation, that management's just falling down on the job or whatever. That's not what that means. In most cases, except for when it's an OPA audit, in most cases, and often, and it's not just Sandag, but it's in most cases for an external auditor, whether it be a compliance for around a federal grant or financial, unless it's highly material, those recommendations are just that, they're recommendations. They're not requirements to fix it by a certain date, and it's not always going to result in a corrective action plan. So if all these yellows you see, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a corrective action plan that they must fix. And it's also not that these recommendations have not been repetitive, right? Because we all know, working for government, we often have repetitive recommendations in our audits. And so this doesn't identify how many times that this yellow dot has been recommended to be fixed or to be improved. It just simply means that it's a recommendation. The only time you'll see anything on the other columns is when there is an actual corrective action plan that either my office, because we've done the audit, or another entity, oversight agency, or the financial auditors determined or deemed that it was material enough, they will then ask for a corrective action plan. And if that's, and management does a corrective action plan, we do in fact put on here that a corrective action plan, and we fill in more of the dots. But the only time we test as OPA is we're only testing our corrective action plans, because we are the ones who performed that audit. We are not testing other corrective action plans, because that's really up to the auditors that performed the audit. So just to have that information, as a result of my discussions and briefings, there was some positive changes that we will make to this document next year. And though it will take, again, resources I don't really have, we are going to make this other step, which is to add in a column and reach out to these individuals and ask that they provide us, or we'll try to find it through their auditors, if the recommendation was repetitive. And what we'll add in that column is, if it's repetitive, we'll have in there that it was repetitive 1, 2, 3, or 4, whatever times. So what that can bring is sort of a forced change. So there may not be a corrective action plan, but what that does tell the audit committee is that this is a recommendation that auditors have made more than once to management. And what that can bring is a movement from the audit committee recommending to the full board that this needs to have a corrective action plan. There actually needs to be an implementation of this recommendation, because obviously if it's been recommended more than one time, maybe it's necessary. And so that will give the audit committee and the board the opportunity to support management in actually creating a plan and following through with the recommendation. So it's sort of another nudge that can help that recommendation along. Another thing that we will add is we have the green dot, which tells us that they've accomplished, that they've actually corrected that. So there was possibly a corrective action plan attached to that recommendation. And one of the audit committee members requested that, you know, they're more of a narrative type of person. So the green dot doesn't mean a lot to them, because what they want to know is when it was accomplished, when did they complete it? So they can look and see when it was asked to be complete and when it got complete. So they can see timelines of how long management is taking to actually accomplish and complete a recommendation. So those two columns will be added to the next year's, and it will allow for more flexibility and discussion among the committee members to encourage management in actually implementing a recommendation that they might not otherwise implement. Another thing that's really important is that we reach out, and we will do this shortly on an annual basis, just to remind management, and I think most of them have gotten used to OPA being involved, and so when an audit comes, they automatically loop me in, and then they make sure I get the draft and the final report. So they've been, for the most part, good about that, but there's a lot of moving parts to audits around SANDAG, and so we'll send a gentle reminder out every quarter, reminding SANDAG staff that if they're involved in any type of audit, whether it be internal or external, and hopefully internal, it shouldn't be, because that should just be me in my office, that we're involved in it, we're looped into it, so we can make sure that it is making it to this report. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mary. First, I'll check public members. Francesca, do we have any public members?
No, Chair, no hands from the public.
Okay, board members. Do any of the board members have comments or questions on the update? Okay, so far I see must have done an excellent job there, Mary. I don't see any board members with their hands up. I did want to just kind of reiterate a couple things that we had talked about a little bit too, but just so it's on the record, again, the due dates that are in the plan are when we expect to have them implemented by staff, but not when they're verified by your team, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And yet completed items that are marked as completed, they don't get marked as completed until they're verified by your team, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of an odd idiosyncrasy to me about how the report is presented. I don't know in the future if we want to try to adapt to that a little bit, but I did, again, for the record, at least want to put on the record that because a lot of the items that are in here with respect to the audit that we did around compensation, your team did around compensation and performance last year are marked as due on June 30th, which is 5 days from now. And the information that you have from staff at this point is that they're all on track.
Yes.
Okay.
And a good thing, I'm glad you brought that up, Chair Zito, because one thing that I want to make clear is that when it's an audit done by OPA, and there usually is a corrective action plan, because we have, we're an internal perspective more, and so we involve the board and the audit committee more, and we work more closely with management. There usually will always be a corrective action plan, and so when that happens, it's not just, well, the due date is here and then they just finally reach out to me. management is reaching out to me constantly throughout this process as they're making improvements, as they're correcting actions. And we're having a discussion back and forth. They're asking my input, they're providing me information, they're asking for guidance, I'm giving them my input and my feedback. And so there's a great deal of dialogue that is happening even before the June 30th date. So when it comes to me finished and completed on the June 30th date, that's when they feel really comfortable with everything they've done. And then I can go out and test against what they say is now implemented to make sure it is in fact implemented and that it's working. And so that's why there's that delay. And anytime they're not going to make a date, they don't just wait until the date. They actually reach out to me, in fair advance and say, hey, we're not going to make this date and here's why. And I simply ask them to document it. And if it's reasonable to me, I join with them, and that they reached out to me and they gave me a reasonable explanation. And so I agree with their delay. And so that's constantly happening between myself and management. So we're working together constantly. And then, of course, we have to have time as OPA, after they meet their deadline and they hand us the stuff over, we actually have to have time to do our testing and to be able to provide results to the audit committee and then thereafter the board.
Great, thanks. And then I noticed there are some items in the report that are marked as red, and those have been discussed with staff and they understand why they're red and plans are being developed around those.
So the ones around red are based on the dates that they gave us that these things were to be implemented, and they're not our audit, there's some other auditor's audit. And what we did that we will not do, because again, we don't have the resources to kind of follow this through, but we did want to reach out to the contact person around these red ones that are beyond the date they say they would make them, to see if they've actually accomplished it and just forgot to reach out to us and let us know. And in some cases that was the case. The ones that we still have as red and noted that we did reach out to them but haven't had a response, those are still pending. We did reach out to those individuals. We haven't gotten a response or evidence provided to us that shows us they've actually accomplished those deadlines. So they are still red and pending. Yeah.
Okay, and yeah, I'm bringing that up, and I don't know, maybe someone from staff can address, but obviously, presumably the next step is this report would go to the full board, and I just want to make sure that there isn't a miscommunication that happens as part of the report going to the full board and saying that this is red, and then somebody coming up at the board meeting and say, well, no, it's not actually red. So, if there's somebody, Hassan, on your staff that can follow up and say, yeah, we agree, these are ones that are behind and we're okay with it being reported to the board as that way, then that's fine. But let's make sure that gets firmed up before the presentation goes to the full board.
Yeah, and so we definitely would like to hear from those individuals. We did
Right.
We did make several attempts on these ones. We actually made more than 1 or 2 attempts and did not hear feedback. We did hear feedback from a lot of them, by the way, that we were able to clear the reds, but just those ones are still outstanding. So if we hear anything prior to us forwarding this to the board, which will happen at the next board meeting, that we can get it on as it's information only. Then we can make those changes.
Okay, thanks. Stuart, I see you have a question.
Yeah, it's really prompted by appreciating you bringing this up, Chair. Just a thought on those, particularly those red dot items. One thing the city of San Diego does as far as audit recommendation follow-up is an exercise colloquially referred to as the walk of shame, where they actually invite to the audit committee meeting the people who are responsible for those recommendations and actually have a discussion as to, hey, where are you? We're seeing that you're behind. Can you help us understand where things are? So just kind of brainstorming, maybe at some point that might be something that we would all consider doing as well.
Yeah, I like that type of idea. We just need to figure out if there's a way to get it done without burdening Mary's staff too much. So since it's not really her job to be doing all of the audits, but it is important that our audited items are done when and not be showing up as red.
Yeah, and also for clarification, what I was referring to is not that we burden Mary with it, but
Right.
for the people who are responsible in the departments, various places within Sandag who have responsibility for the implementations,
Right.
they actually come and tell us. So in a sense,
Yeah.
maybe helping Mary get a little bit of her work done as well.
Okay. Thank you. Agnes?
Yes, I hope you can hear me. I want to have 2 points. One is want to echo what Chair Zito has mentioned earlier. Make sure that Hassan agreed that all the reds are indeed red before going to the board. I think it's really important to be in alignment on that one. The second one is kind of along the same lines what Stuart said. I also seen organization basically employee performance evaluation. How timely they clear the audit findings goes into part of the performance evaluation, and sometimes that helps, right? Because then there's some teeth to it. So it's just my comments.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. Good thought. Sorry.
I'm sorry, this is Jim Lunthicum. Can I make a comment on that, particularly the red dots?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm paging through these red dots, and it looks like the majority of them are recommendations from the ITOC auditor to ITOC, then to make a recommendation to staff. And I know Stuart's been on ITOC for a long, long time, and I know that ITOC and Sandag staff have had difficulty in doing some of these. Like, at what level is the Sandag staff involvement in the local cities and what they do with their Transnet dollars? In fact, ITOC had a subcommittee trying to work that out. And how do you develop metrics and things like that? So the ITOC subcommittee, ITOC staff, the city managers and the city engineers that we work with, they've all had a difficulty developing metrics on things like that to report out, because some of them use their money for pavement, some of them use them for traffic signals. There's no one use for a lot of that money. And it also cuts to the heart of how much effort does Sandag staff put in overseeing how a city spends the money that they get from Transnet, and that's obviously a policy call.
Okay. Yeah, good points. I just, once again, it obviously as a board member, anytime you see something in red, there needs to be enough information behind there that people feel comfortable that they understand why and what's going to happen about it, so it doesn't turn into a fight during the board meeting. That's all I'm trying to avoid. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. With that, I believe I don't see any other hands up. I do think we have a good update, and Mary, thanks to your staff. Greatly appreciate the aggregation that you've done here and starting to bring transparency to what's going on. That's really, truly very useful. And with that, I believe we need a motion to recommend this be brought to the board. Anybody so willing?
If it's needed, I'd make a motion.
Yeah, I mean, Mary, I assume you need a motion to say that we're okay sending this to the board, or was this just informational for us too?
Yeah, it's informational, but yeah, it should be recommended that it goes to the board.
Okay, so Stuart motions. I will go ahead and second. Francesca, please call for the vote.
Thank you very much. Board Member Chair Zito.
Zito, yes.
Thank you. Board Member Vice Chair Vasquez.
Vasquez, yes.
Thank you. Public Member Agnes Wong Nickerson.
Wong Nickerson, yes.
Thank you. Public Member Stuart Halpern.
Halpern, yes.
Thank you. And Public Member Bob Monson.
Monson, yes.
Thank you. And that does pass unanimously.
Great, thank you. With that, we will move on to item number 7, which is the hiring process and contract term and language. And Mary, you're up again.
Okay. I think, Hassan and I, one thing we both agree on, and I think it's important, and Hassan, you can jump in if you want to. that we have both agreed that the importance of this, the independence of this office, it's just very important. I mean, it's not only the actual independence, but the appearance of the independence is important. That's why when we talk about impairment, we talk about both an appearance and in actuality. So, you know, this discussion is really to, it's never been had, I think. Hassan, do you want to say something before I get started?
Yes, I do, Mary. And Chair, if I may.
Yes, please, Hassan.
Yeah, thank you. And I said this to you as committee members, and I said this to Mary, and I will say it, and I want you to hold me to it. I respect the independence of Mary and her team. I believe Sandag is going to be a better agency because we have that relationship. She respects what I do, I respect what she does, but there's independence here. I would never be a situation where I would intervene or intentionally try to intervene, or and I know she won't allow me even if I wanted to, but I want you to know my style is everything on the table. Mary, go do your job, you're independent. We're both report to the board, you know, and we both understand the job and what's entailed. So I want you to know that it is important for Mary and her office to maintain that independence. And I fully, I think we're on the same page on this one. I just want to assure you of that, and I want publicly to say it. To Stuart's points, transparency is important. So just wanted to say that before you get into the report.
Thanks, Hassan.
Thank you. So Mary, you have more comments? Presentation?
So, you know, I have to go back.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys wanted to talk about the fraud, waste, and abuse report, but we kind of forgot about that.
We did not talk about it, correct? But that wasn't the previous item. I assume if board members had some comments outside of, I'll make the same comment I did last time, which is who's complaining about traffic circles. But anyway, but no, I think we're now on to item number 7, unless
Okay.
there's something you wanted to say about that. But
No, I just was looking at it because that was the next thing on my screen, and I'm like, oh, we just forgot to talk about that. But anyways, that will also be posted on the website. So
yes, it was approved as part of the last discussion.
Okay.
So once again, yeah, item 7, there's more that you wanted to bring up there.
yeah, definitely. Okay, so in item 7, I just think it's really important that it's not been discussed, and I don't think this is a us versus them. I don't think this is an OPA versus management issue. I think it's just never been discussed. And so we're all trying to figure it out. And as a result of all trying to figure it out, there's times as a result of that, I've lost some good candidates. And so I think it's important that we have this discussion and seek input from both the audit committee members and possibly the board on the direction we should go. So 2 of the candidates that I previously had offered positions to and they had accepted it, but once they got the contract, they rejected the offer. And the first rejection was because there were actual errors in the contract that stated that the independent auditor that would be working for me would actually be reporting and have his performance reviews done by Hassan. And so that was an obvious error. And to be fair, the analyst that was handling it was fairly new to Sandag, and she was unaware that there is differences between the treatment of my office versus other Sandag employees. So I think what needs to occur is both education to Sandag staff in general, that there is a difference between OPA and the other employees at Sandag. And there is a different treatment, though I always want to follow policies and procedures. I think that's how it should be. I'm all about following the rules. I'm all about following policies and procedures, but there are certain circumstances, again, around independence and ensuring there's that independence when it comes to OPA that will change as a result of that around policies and procedures. So one of them is the reporting structure. So I lost that candidate because they didn't feel comfortable. And even though we tried to iron that out and explain to them that it was an obvious error, that of course they would be reporting to me and not the executive director, government auditors are notorious and have experienced many battles. And Bob, as a government auditor, you can share your thoughts. Many battles of trying to do the right thing and not always being able to because they were threatened or retaliated against for doing their jobs. And one of the things that get put into play is what AB 805 put in for me. And it was, I report strictly to the board and that I cannot be terminated without cause, meaning there must be a reason I'm being terminated. And the reason AB 805 put that in there is to ensure that I have protection and that I won't be retaliated against for doing my job. And so most government auditors, when they're given a contract and they're told that you could be terminated with or without cause, the first thing that comes to their mind is fear of retaliation. And I believe I lost both of my candidates because it happened again, the candidate accepted it and then he got the contract and he rejected it. And so I believe it's this whole term of first being with or without cause. I believe that it should be consistent, that it should not be, you cannot terminate a government auditor without cause. And I know that the argument has been made that because they're reporting to me, then it shouldn't matter about with or without cause. But that's not true either, because I know for a fact, being a government auditor for 25 years, that there are government chief auditors who are not as ethical and also do not follow the rules that they should be following about retaliation and who have retaliated against their own auditors for the auditors trying to do their job. And so I believe that AB 805 should be followed consistently, not just for me, but for my auditors. I should not be able to terminate my auditors unless I have cause. So that's one issue I wanted to discuss. And the other issue is I don't mind my auditors being consistent with other new hires at Sandag and having an at-will contract, but I don't understand the logic of having an at-will contract and a 3-year term put in that same contract. An at-will contract means that you could be let go at will at any time. So putting 3 years in there, again, for a permanent position that's funded permanently, it makes the employee who's coming to Sandag feel at risk that they could not have a job in 3 years. And when you're talking about someone who may be coming from, another state, which was my case, and another city, which was also the case, you're telling that individual to give up their secure position to come work for an agency where they only may have a job for 3 years. And on top of that, they can be terminated without even cause. So I have not been very successful in getting 2 really great candidates. I lost them both because of these 2 issues. So I just wanted to bring this, elevate this up for discussion to the audit committee and possibly to the board, and ask that we be consistent and follow AB 805 and treat AB 805 as we treat myself. And for government auditors not to be able to be terminated without cause, and that we consider removing, I don't mind the at-will contract, but we consider removing the 3-year term because it really does drive really good applicants away. And that's all.
Great, thanks for the discussion. So just to summarize, it sounds like the 2 points you really wanted to just discuss around were the termination without cause and the 3-year contract term. Those were 2 of the items that were concerning or causing you grief and getting candidates to come on board.
Yeah, and just to educate, making sure that we're educating staff to understand the difference between OPA and that we definitely believe in following policy. I respect all policies made by Sandag and support them.
Right.
But just there are some differences at times, and I think we need to consider that and educate staff when there are differences.
Okay. Francesca confirming, I see no public comments on this item.
No chair, no hands from the public.
Okay, thank you. Do any board members wish to make any comments or have any questions? Bob? Yeah, Bob, you're muted.
Always forget to take that thing off. Just a couple of things, just from my own experience. When I was the port auditor, I was the port's first port auditor that they'd ever had. And I ran into similar situations that Mary is running into. And education is really important. I don't know how that gets done, Mary, but for me, it was consistent. Every time I was meeting with an executive, every time I was meeting with management, I had to relay that message. I remember the first time I was going to hire somebody. HR came back and said, well, the CEO has to approve that. You can't just do that. And I had to remind them again, well, wait a minute, I'm a board appointed position as the CEO is, but we're two separate. So I agree with you, Mary. There's got to be education. I don't know how that works. I don't know if Hassan gets more involved with that to make sure. I'm not really sure. I'll leave that up to you. As far as the term limits are concerned, we didn't have term limits. I have never experienced term limits. Now, for me as the port auditor, yes, I had a term contract. Mine was at will without cause. So they had to have a cause to be able to terminate me. For my staff and for the rest of port staff that were salaried at will, there were no term contracts. We had the at will contract. And so that's where again, I don't know what the process is going to be other than, I don't know what the process is going to be at Sandag. I would just explain, this has been my experience. I agree with Mary. There needs to, because the independence is so important with her position and her staff's positions, there needs to be something in place where they can't be eliminated, or not eliminated, that was the wrong choice of words, but they can't be fired because the CEO or the executive auditor doesn't like them or doesn't like what they did. So I guess that's kind of my thinking about that. There shouldn't be term contracts for the auditors. At will, I'm fine with that. I do think it should be considered without cause, adding that additional protection. So that's my thoughts, Chair Cito. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate the comments. Stuart.
Thanks. I have a question, sort of a process question, which maybe is a John Kirk question, which is that assuming that we agree with Mary, is this something that simply Hassan has the ability to implement, or is there a actual Sandag administrative policy that would have to be changed by the board?
Ultimately, you have board policy 39 that carries forward a lot of the provisions, the statutory provisions of AB 805, and that talks about the appointment of both the independent performance auditor and then the employees and staff of the independent performance auditor. I will point out that under AB 805, specifically it's Public Utilities Code 132.354.1, that deals with the independent performance auditor, that one individual, a bit differently than it deals with the staff, employees, assistants of the independent performance auditor. Under section B1 there, it says the audit committee shall appoint an independent performance auditor subject to approval by the board who may be only removed by cause. That's the independent performance auditor. Later in that section, it says the auditor shall have the power to appoint, employ, and remove assistants, employees, and personnel. as deemed necessary for the efficient and effective administration of the affairs of that office. So there it seems to deal with the independent performance auditor versus employees a bit differently with regard to that at-will status. So your question again, your board policy carries forward those statutory provisions into board policy, but that board policy does need to be consistent with the statute.
But then, John, that from what you read on it says the IPA has the power to do this. So then why would it not be me who had the power to say with or without cause?
It's that it's not necessarily you, it's more the position. So a future independent performance auditor, to be consistent with the statute, my advice would be you shouldn't tie the hands of a future independent performance auditor in terms of whether they have the power to appoint, employ, and remove assistants by putting a board policy that says that they cannot be removed in the discretion of the auditor, perhaps some future auditor. That could be inconsistent with what is in the Public Utilities Code. You can exercise your discretion as you like in terms of how it is that you deal with your staff. But in terms of a future auditor, I would say that you don't want to bind their discretion in a way that's inconsistent with the statute.
So then, but isn't it binding me right now as the IPA when you're saying that I can't actually protect staff by putting that they can't be without cause?
You have the ability to remove assistants without condition. And so by taking that out, ultimately, you're going to enter into a contract with staff. Those staff may be here after you're here, and a future auditor would not then have the power to remove those assistants as the statute says that they should. That would be my concern.
Unless that policy was changed after I left, could that not be done as quick as it could be done to be changed while I'm here?
I would just say again, any change to the policy needs to be consistent with the statute. And a change to the policy that would say that staff can only be removed for cause, in my opinion, would be inconsistent with the statute. But again, while they're your staff, you can hire, employ, remove them as you see fit.
I appreciate the answer. So then if I'm interpreting it correctly, and please do tell me if I've got this wrong, what I hear you saying is that to try to kind of sort of split the baby, so to speak, one could craft the agreements that speak to Mary's term, that during the term of the current IPA, that they could not be removed without cause, whether by the IPA or anybody else. What I'm hearing you say is that that would be consistent with the Public Utility Code, or?
I would still have concerns there. Ultimately, I would say anything that is there should not be tied to an individual. It should be tied to the office. And the office has to have the ability to do what the statute allows it to do.
Okay, then I guess I'm curious as to, it sounded to me like what Bob described was consistent with what Mary's proposing, but which you're describing as contrary to Public Utilities Code. So maybe we need to research that a little bit more.
Well, ultimately, the Sandag Public Utilities Code section here isn't necessarily the same one that other entities, and I'm only interpreting this particular Public Utilities Code section that applies to Sandag.
Got it. Okay. Well, I guess my final comment would be, I think Bob's comments were very persuasive along with Mary's. So I would just suggest that we try to find a way as far as we can, going to Hassan's earlier comments about the importance of the independence of the office.
Absolutely.
That we try to find a way to go as far toward protecting not just, as Mary described herself, but the staff as well.
Certainly, and ultimately, Mary is the one who has the oversight over all that staff. That needs to be completely independent of management. Fully concur with that.
Yeah, I think my overall concern is really, one, making sure that, I know me as a person, but they don't know me. So when I'm trying to hire someone and they're concerned about this and I don't get them because they're concerned about it, I can't say, well, just trust me. Trust me that I would never, as an executive auditor, fire you for no reason. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to move across the country by trusting Mary, who they've never met before, knowing that they've experienced, I'm sure, as a government auditor in their lifetime, that this does happen, and it happens sadly more than it should. And so I've lost two really great candidates because of it, and also around that 3-year term commitment, which for me, there's just no, when it's a permanent funded position, I've never seen a term be put in a contract unless it's a limited term position. And these are not limited term positions.
Mhm.
So I struggle with really, and I would think overall Sandag might struggle with really retaining great possible candidates because of these two sticklers, and I just hope that we can find a way to work together and put some language in that would bring more secure comfort to these candidates and make them feel like they want to come to work for Sandag, not that they're in fear of coming to work for Sandag.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to continue to work with you, Mary, on that, to look at what we can do to give you options that would be consistent with what the mandates of the statute are.
I haven't heard anything discussed about the 3-year term. Is there a requirement that that be in there for some reason?
No.
Statute doesn't speak to it.
Okay, so that one, it seems like there would be a strong recommendation from this group to not include that language for a 3-year term, particularly if the discretion is intended to be under Mary's control. So seems like, yeah, I would, yeah. And then with respect to the other one, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to speak as an attorney, but it sounds like, again, the guidance from this committee would be for you to continue to work, John, you to continue to work with Mary to see if there's ways that we can come up to give more confidence to candidates that they're not going to be retaliated against. And what can we do that? Because once again, if they feel that fear, I get it, but I understand the points you're raising about making sure that the office has the flexibility it needs. And obviously we're the board in 4 years, hopefully not, because the staff is ridiculously small to begin with, but to cut her budget in half, she needs to be able to reduce her staff for that reason as well. Hopefully it'll be doubling her budget instead, but regardless, we need to be able to make sure that type of flexibility is maintained. But obviously it's in the best interest for everyone on Sandag for us to be able to get the best candidates possible. And if this is what's driving candidates away, let's see what we can do to fix it.
Of course.
Okay, thanks.
Right.
Stuart, your hand's still up. Were you done, or did you want to say something?
No, actually, I just, hearing your conversation, I just raised one follow-up question if I could, or
Sure.
maybe two questions. John, appreciate the insight you provided. And so let me put it to you this way. I guess I have two components to this. First, your reference to the Public Utilities Code. Would you characterize that as a real bright line clarity kind of thing, or is this somewhat of an interpretive type of thing that's subject to additional research, or different people may have different interpretations? Part one. Part two is, I'm curious that we've got the so far very real world present problem of Mary losing 2 staff people balanced against what might be a theoretical risk of potentially violating some aspect of the public utility code. To put it really simplistically, what if we just decided we had a compelling reason to violate that portion of the code? What real world risk to Sandag might there be?
I'll answer your second question first. And I would never advise that you not follow the Public Utilities Code, especially as it deals with the Office of the Independent Performance Auditor, which is what you are charged with overseeing. That being said, if there's any room in here for interpretation, I would say that the difference between section B1 and B3 of this section 132.354.1 to me is a very bright line. One talks about specifically the independent performance auditor who may only be removed for cause. And the other one talks about the staff of the office of the auditor, which does not have any of the language, any limitation, but instead talks about the power of the auditor to employ, remove those employees and personnel. The standard that's set forth there is very different. As deemed necessary for the efficient and effective administration of the affairs of the office. That is the scope of authority that Mary Kay or whoever else is in that office has in terms of what can you put into a contract there. So to me, that there is a fairly bright line between them, but then what can you put into a contract that complies with Section B3? I think that there's a lot of subjectivity there that may be able to meet Mary's needs while still being compliant with the statute.
Yeah, and one thing came to mind, John, now that you're talking about that, is possibly we can put an exception to that without cause, with the exception of, anything relating to following professional auditing standards or anything like that. So maybe we can work with that language that then supports that the without cause could never be around them actually doing their job or following professional auditing standards. And then getting rid of the term. I think that would help a lot. I think
regardless of what's here, there's a whole nother body of statutory and case law that talks about affording protection to every employee, regardless of their position, that they may not be retaliated against for effectively whistleblowing.
No, and I'm aware of that. But when you're trying to offer someone a job, you definitely don't want to start getting into, well, you can always whistleblow. I mean, that's just not one that you want to encourage from the get-go, right? So hopefully we can put some kind of clause in there around, and with the exception of that you followed professional standards or something like that, that would ensure or give insurance and comfort to that auditor that it would never be about them doing their job and following standards. And so some type of exception, and then also removing the terms, the 3-year terms. I think that would be a huge help. Yeah.
Great. So you'll continue to work with John and then maybe report back next month on how that went, right?
Yep.
That sound reasonable? I don't think we need any other action at this point.
Okay.
I see no other board member hands up, I believe. Let me get back to that window. Yes, I see no other hands up. Did last chance? Anybody else have any comments? Otherwise, that is the end of that item. Thanks for bringing it to our attention, Mary. And our next meeting is scheduled for Friday, July 23rd, 2021 at 12:30 p.m. That sort of wraps up this meeting.